We're very glad that you could join us today for the first in our series of online workshops on the topic of green entrepreneurship. My name is Brock Dickinson, and I'm the entrepreneur in residence with the Faculty of Environment at the University of Waterloo. I wanted to begin today by acknowledging that we are on, we're having some technical difficulties on the PowerPoint presentation here. That we are coming to you from the University of Waterloo today, which is located on the traditional territories of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. The University of Waterloo is situated on the Haldimand Tract, the land originally promised to the Six Nations of the Grand River, and an area that includes 6 miles on either side of the Grand River. As is our custom in Canada, we like to begin with these traditional land acknowledgements as a way of recognizing the peoples who we share this land with. It's my pleasure, though, to turn things over at this point to the MC for today's program. I'd like to introduce Carly Cameron. Carly is the program's lead at Concept, Imagined by Velocity, one of the world's most successful student-driven incubation programs. And her on-campus initiative supports students who are interested in pursuing entrepreneurship or are interested in dipping their toes into entrepreneurial waters. Most of Carly's work lies in customizing each student's entrepreneurial experience and focusing on their individual needs. She is currently completing her Master's in Economic Development and Innovation, which is a program within the Faculty of Environment at the University of Waterloo, and we're pleased to have her as our MC for today's event. So with that, I will turn things over to Carly.
Thank you for the introduction, Brock. Welcome to the first in a series of 6 workshops on the topic of green entrepreneurship, developed by the University of Waterloo Entrepreneurship at Environment Office with support from the Commission for Environmental Cooperation and the EcoInnovation Network. Designed for youth, students, and entrepreneurs from across Canada, the United States, and Mexico. Translated simultaneously into English, French, and Spanish. So connect the audio channel in your preferred language at the bottom. However, we have more than 300 participants who have signed up from more than 20 countries, as far afield as India, Colombia, Qatar, Ghana, and Slovakia. So today I will be introducing the speakers and presenters. We will be having some initial words of welcome from our partners, and then this will be followed by presentation from today's 3 panelists. Then an open Q&A where you can use the Q&A function embedded into Zoom to pose questions. I will do my best to select a few themed questions. We will conclude in about 90 minutes time. Now, introducing Dr. Jean Andrey. She is the Dean of the University of Waterloo's Faculty of Environment, a professor in the Department of Geography and Environmental Management, and the chair of the Canadian chapter of the Sustainable Development Solutions Network. She is a tireless champion of sustainability research and practice, and of the importance of innovation in achieving sustainability goals. She joins us today from Waterloo, Ontario. Welcome, Jean.
Okay, thank you very much. It's so nice to be here with you. Welcome to this workshop. We're very excited about this, the first of 6. The University of Waterloo's Faculty of Environment is excited to work with our partners in hosting the workshop series. We know we're bringing together youth and researchers and entrepreneurs, and that they're coming to us from across North America and around the world. For those of you who don't know us, our faculty is Canada's 2nd oldest Faculty of Environment and one of the largest, with 8 distinct undergraduate programs and a myriad of degrees and credentials at the grad level. Now, Waterloo region is special, and I say that not just because it's my home. It has for many years been a hotbed of entrepreneurial activity. Research shows, for example, that we have the 2nd highest density of startups in North America, 2nd only to Silicon Valley. But the workshop that we're talking about today is about a special kind of entrepreneurial challenge. And that is the challenge to confront important environmental issues of our time, aligning our entrepreneurial expertise with the drive for a greener future. We need to think more about green entrepreneurship. Now, this workshop series is a big project, and so we want to thank those who've helped us and worked with us along the way. First, we'd like to thank the Commission for Environmental Cooperation, whose technical, logistical, and moral support have helped to make the workshop series a reality. I would like to add a special thanks to Richard Morgan, their Executive Director, who's joining us for today's workshop as well. Second, we recognize that in this time of global pandemic, where the rush to have everything online, it's creating a lot of noise and duplication. And so in this case, we've deliberately partnered with other universities across North America so that we can reinforce each other's efforts and collaborate in the exploration of green entrepreneurship. So to this end, we've partnered with the EcoInnovation Network, which is a new network of green innovation hubs at post-secondary institutions. Thank you to our colleagues in that network, including Laval, Concordia, and Simon Fraser universities in Canada, Sagrado Corazon and the University of Oklahoma in the United States, and Querétaro and Anahuac universities in Mexico. Thanks also to all of you who've chosen to participate in the workshops. We're facing massive challenges in this global community of ours, but we are confident that challenges like biodiversity loss and dangerous levels of pollution and the accelerating forces of climate change, we are confident and hopeful that some of you gathered here will be delivering the tools and the solutions that will enable us to overcome them and build the greener tomorrow that all of us wish for so much. So again, welcome and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jean. Now introducing Richard Morgan. Richard Morgan was appointed Executive Director of the Commission for Environmental Cooperation on July 16th, 2019. After serving a 4-year term as Commissioner of the Canada-US International Joint Commission from 2014 to 2018. He brings over 30 years of combined experience in government, business, and management consulting in several sectors, ranging from natural resources to health sciences. He joins us today from Montreal, Quebec.
All right, thank you, Carly, and special thank you to Dean Andrey. Thank you for your kind words, and also thank you to Brock Dickinson for your special welcome today. As mentioned, I am the Executive Director of the Commission for Environmental Cooperation. We are better known as the CEC, and we were created by the governments of Canada, Mexico, and the United States over 25 years ago as a key part of the North American Free Trade Agreement to serve as a facilitator and implementer of cooperative efforts focused on environmental protection and enforcement and sustainable development. On a wide range of topics, from air pollution and waste reduction to ecosystems protection and monitoring, the CEC collaborates with partners from different geographic areas and fields of expertise to implement solutions that protect North America's shared environment. Over a year ago, the CEC had the ambitious idea to bring together innovation centers from Canada, Mexico, and the US into a North American-wide network to accelerate green innovation and entrepreneurship in the 3 countries. Because of the leadership, dedication, and know-how of the University of Waterloo, along with 8 other outstanding academic institutions, the EcoInnovation Network was born and is now supporting a new generation of innovators dedicated to creating and leading a sustainable society. We are very pleased today to be co-hosting this workshop series, and we look forward to hearing from high caliber practitioners, researchers, and entrepreneurs over the next 6 weeks. On this occasion, I also wanted to express our very special gratitude to Mr. Brock Dickinson, who has been instrumental and the success of the EcoInnovation Network, and whose expertise and engaging attitude has motivated many young entrepreneurs and students and all the other members of our network. We are certainly looking forward to future collaborations with Brock and the University of Waterloo. So please enjoy the sessions, and thank you for your attention. Have a good day.
Thank you, Richard. The Honourable Jonathan Wilkinson is the Member of Parliament for North Vancouver and Canada's Minister of Environment and Climate Change. Raised in Saskatchewan, Minister Wilkinson spent more than 20 years in the private sector, holding leadership positions with a number of companies dedicated to the development of green technologies. He was CEO of both Quest Air Technologies and the Biotech Environmental Technologies. A Rhodes Scholar, Minister Wilkinson has an educational background in public policy. He has shared the following video message with us from his office in Ottawa.
Hello, I'm Jonathan Wilkinson, Canada's Minister of Environment and Climate Change and a co-chair of the Commission for Environmental Cooperation. My thanks to the University of Waterloo and the CEC for inviting me to participate with you today. It is a pleasure to join you virtually to help kick off your workshop focused on green entrepreneurship, a forum which has brought young people from around North America together to focus on solutions to help drive clean growth and innovation. This forum is of particular interest to me because before I got into politics, I had spent over 15 years as a chief executive officer and a senior executive in Canada's clean tech sector, leading companies focusing mainly on the reducing greenhouse gas emissions. The Canadian government firmly believes that we need to accelerate the clean growth economy, creating jobs while fighting climate change. We are presently as a world facing critical challenges, existential challenges associated with climate change and accelerating biodiversity loss. Certainly we believe that in the modern world, the environment and the economy can and must go together. Economic growth must be done within a frame of environmental sustainability. And now, facing a global pandemic, we have seen just how important it is to work and collaborate across jurisdictions to tackle the big challenges. A lesson which I hope we can apply to the fight against climate change. I think it is fantastic that you are convening this forum to discuss these important subjects, and I certainly wish you very well with your discussions. Have a wonderful workshop, and thank you.
And as a reminder, please use the little globe at the bottom in case you need to change the language. Now we're going to invite each of our expert panelists to talk for about 15 minutes on the question of what is a green entrepreneur. I'll introduce each before they speak. Please think about questions you may have for them once they're done and type those to the Q&A section. Brock Dickinson is a serial entrepreneur who has launched businesses in the waste management, environmental technology, import-export, and consulting fields. He also spent 6 years as an advisor to the United Nations Environment Program, working in more than 30 countries. He is currently the entrepreneur in residence with the Faculty of Environment at the University of Waterloo and serves as an advisor to a number of incubators and innovation organizations across North America. He is joining us today from just near Niagara Falls on the Canada-US border.
Thank you, Carly. I appreciate the kind words of introduction. I can't actually see if my camera is on at the moment, so please let me know if it's not. But I'm pleased to sort of kick off the content of today's workshop as we think about this question of what is a green entrepreneur. And I'm sure that there are many different ways that we could answer this particular question. But I might take a step back into history and sort of reflect on the words of the philosopher Machiavelli. And we don't usually think of Machiavelli as somebody who's going to guide us on environmental issues. But back in his book, The Prince, written in the 15th century, he says, entrepreneurs are simply those that understand there is little difference between an obstacle and an opportunity. And I think that's a really compelling idea as we think about green entrepreneurship, the sense that obstacles, challenges, problems, crises become opportunities for us to think about new solutions, new tools, new ideas, and that entrepreneurship is often the vehicle for overcoming the obstacle or the challenge. We've heard a number of mentions already about the question of biodiversity loss. And this is a problem that strikes me particularly strongly sometimes. We are, by some estimates, losing 3 species of plants or animals every single hour. That's 72 a day, 504 a week, 2,160 a month, 26,280 a year. That's a pretty big obstacle. And as we think about green entrepreneurship, it's sometimes hard to think about how that obstacle can become an opportunity in some sense. Similarly, we can think of other kinds of problems. September last month was Ovarian Cancer Awareness Month. Ovarian cancer is a deadly disease that has traditionally killed 12,000 women in North America every year. And we can see that this too is an obstacle, and sometimes it's difficult to think about solutions. But as we think about those obstacles, green entrepreneurship, in fact, shows us a bit of the direction that we can move in by treating those obstacles as entrepreneurial opportunities. So scientists in the 1990s discovered that the bark of the Pacific yew tree contained a chemical compound called Taxol. And Taxol, it turns out, is the only effective drug treatment for ovarian cancer. The problem that we faced in the 90s with that discovery was that the Pacific yew tree was an endangered species, an extremely rare tree species on the brink of extinction. And as we discovered the drug benefits of Taxol, we ran the risk of not being able to solve the problem of ovarian cancer or the problem of biodiversity loss as this plant became dangerously close to extinction. And only by rescuing that plant from the brink, by cultivating the plants, and over time by actually developing Pacific yew plantations, were we able to overcome those 2 obstacles. We were able to save this species from the brink of extinction, and we were able to save the lives of 12,000 women a year in North America. And today, the Pacific yew industry is worth more than $1 billion a year and employs tens of thousands of people around the world. In my mind, this is one of those examples of green entrepreneurship, of how obstacles can become opportunities. And so when we talk about entrepreneurship in the green context, I think we're talking about something a little bit different than we have often talked about when we've said the word entrepreneurship. Because entrepreneurship is about more than just starting a business. It's about overcoming obstacles. It's about creating solutions, about creating ventures that allow us to seize new opportunities. And in that context, entrepreneurship may be about creating a business venture, but it might also be about creating other kinds of ventures. It could be about creating a viable social enterprise, about creating a successful not-for-profit structure, or simply about mobilizing new tools that will benefit the communities we live and work in. We can look in all kinds of places for standard definitions about entrepreneurship. This is one that is stolen from a version of Wikipedia a couple of years ago, in which we define entrepreneurship not just in financial terms, but to think about entrepreneurship as a way of organizing resources, organizing human resources, organizing investment, organizing technology, but organizing them to create structures like businesses, like ventures that turn ideas into viable innovations. And when I look at this kind of a definition, I'm struck by how close it is to the technical definition that the United Nations developed years ago for the concept of sustainable development. That if we put those 2 definitions side by side, we can see a lot of similarities. That both entrepreneurship and sustainability are about using resources and investments and technologies to create innovations that will transform the world around us. That's a very powerful concept because it means in some sense that entrepreneurship and sustainability are parallel tracks, that they exist in a realm that allows a lot of interaction and overlap between the two concepts. And I think one way we can really begin to understand this is to look at something like the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, sometimes called the Global Goals, the set of 17 development objectives that as a global community, we have agreed we want to work on between now and the year 2030. And if we look at some of these goals specifically, we start to get a sense of the role that entrepreneurship can play in creating a greener and more sustainable future. For some of these goals, the connections between the objective and entrepreneurship are fairly obvious. If we think about Goal 8 with the objective of good jobs and economic growth, or Goal 1 around the elimination of poverty, we can see how entrepreneurship could play a role in those spaces. But in many of the goals, there is an even stronger role for entrepreneurship in helping us to achieve the objectives that we've agreed on. Goal 6 talks about the need for clean water and sanitation. Goal 7 talks about affordable and clean energy. And it's clear to me that as we think about those objectives, we will need new tools, new technologies, new ideas to achieve those goals. And one of the most effective ways to mobilize those tools and technologies will be entrepreneurship. Or we can even think about larger goals like Goal 12, responsible consumption and production, or Goal 13 around climate action. As we think about the big system-wide changes that we will need to undertake to achieve these goals, it's also clear to me that entrepreneurship and new entrepreneurial ventures will be one of the ways in which we can make the transitions that we need to make. And one of the ways we can make those transitions in the short period of time that we have between now and 2030. Entrepreneurship has an advantage over some other types of mobilizing resources because of the speed with which we can bring new ideas to bear. In our office, we talk a lot about different kinds of green entrepreneurs as we think about different streams of entrepreneurship activity. And we're still working on this. This is a concept that we're developing at the moment. We hope to be able to share it across this network in the near future. But we've already started to think about 4 different kinds of green entrepreneurs. So starting at the top here, there are those that develop new technologies, perhaps in energy or in water treatment or in soil remediation. There is a second group, the second level down, that improves existing products and systems. We think about environmental fashion. We think about improved carbon footprints for certain kinds of products. The third level down is the entrepreneurs who work in the development of new types of platforms and networks. We think about online marketplaces for green products or new kinds of apps that allow consumers to make responsible or environmental choices in their daily activities. And a fourth level of green entrepreneurship relates to things like advisory services and consulting or education. We think of things like sustainability consulting or environmental engineering. The reality is that entrepreneurs in each of these spaces are green, but entrepreneurs in each of these spaces have very distinct and different kinds of needs. And one of the challenges in our current entrepreneurship support systems is that we're not always very good at supporting this wide range of green entrepreneurship activity. Some of these areas of activity are better supported than others. We think, for example, of that first category of new technologies in things like water treatment or soil remediation. Those technologies are often fairly well supported because of the way we have developed support structures for entrepreneurs historically. Across North America, we have all kinds of incubators, we have accelerators, we have support networks and mentoring programs for entrepreneurs. But many of those programs were developed in the 1980s and 1990s, the early 2000s, as we were thinking about the role of startups in our broader economy. And for many of those facilities, startups meant things like software firms or computer hardware technologies that were emerging. And so our incubation and entrepreneurship support structures have not always been set up to best support green entrepreneurs. There are challenges for green entrepreneurs that exist in ways that other entrepreneurs don't necessarily have to face, and that other sort of entrepreneurial support structures have not fully addressed or supported. So for example, We think about many of the traditional incubators that exist across North America. We think of the shared workspaces that they offer, the hot desking environments, and the opportunity to work in sort of some funky space where multiple companies can gather together around computers. That's a great environment to be in if you're, say, a software developer. Not such a great environment for certain kinds of green entrepreneurs. If you're interested in water treatment technologies or soil remediation technologies or agricultural technologies, you often need a different kind of space to test those technologies, to really act on what's out there. Or we think about how traditional entrepreneurship support structures have addressed the question of scalability, of the ability to grow companies over time. Many companies in that traditional entrepreneurial space have approached scalability in a certain way. If I'm developing a smartphone app, I can scale that in a very independent way. I don't have to rely on the traditional telephone infrastructure to scale my business. But when we start to think about entrepreneurs, for example, in the green energy space, we're often tied to or connected to that traditional infrastructure in very real ways. We can't simply bypass it or work around it. We have to scale up within some of the system that has been created. This means that as we think about entrepreneurship, we have to look in new directions. In that energy example, maybe we have to think about off-grid solutions. And at the University of Waterloo, we have some great researchers who are developing green energy applications for Indigenous and First Nations communities to help them with off-grid energy solutions. But for many entrepreneurs, we want to find ways to engage with the larger systems that are out there. Later today, you're going to hear from Bob Irvin at the CLT JOULES incubator in Charlotte. They've done some amazing work at helping to bridge this kind of a gap by connecting new entrepreneurs to some of those existing structures. And what this suggests to me is that there are all kinds of interesting solutions, ideas, support mechanisms for green entrepreneurs out there. And over the course of the next 6 weeks, we're going to dive into the ideas and supports that green entrepreneurs can begin to access. This time, for the next 6 weeks, every Tuesday, we'll be exploring these ideas in real detail. We will walk through a whole series of concepts and approaches that will be relevant to young entrepreneurs exploring some of the obstacles and some of the opportunities that exist in this green entrepreneurial space. And with that, I will turn things back to Carly.
Thank you, Brock. And just as a reminder, we will ask questions at the end, but make sure to formulate those questions now. All right, next up is Bob Irvin. Bob Irvin has over 30 years of experience in the energy industry, providing strategic and financial leadership to improve stakeholder value. He led transformation efforts at 3 major utilities, TVA, Duke Energy, and New York State Electric and Gas. He is currently the executive director of JOULES, a nonprofit clean energy accelerator. Bob received his MBA from UNC Chapel Hill, his Master's of Environmental Management from Duke University, and his BA in Biology from McDaniel College. He is speaking today from Charlotte, North Carolina.
Thank you, Carly. I appreciate it. Yeah, interesting topic here, and I'm really glad to be able to speak to kind of a North American audience about some of the things that we're doing and how we're trying to survive down here in Charlotte. Because working with corporations, and it doesn't matter what type, but especially utilities, is not the easiest thing when you're trying to introduce innovation and disruptive technologies. You know, my experience, and so I thought it kind of funny. I wanted to draw what a green entrepreneur was. So I was thinking if I would paint, somebody like Elon Musk green, I could say he's a green entrepreneur. I thought of Neil Young, a great Canadian. So I try to think about Canada in this one since it's at Waterloo. Neil Young wrote a song called, that had the lyrics, "Look at Mother Nature on the Run" in the 1970s. And that's kind of when I went to school in the 1970s. And he was kind of right on with his After the Gold Rush song that was that meant a lot to me. And I went on to go to a school that really tried to shut down its environmental department. And now today it's pretty strong, you know, that's 40 years later. But the Nicholas School of the Environment at Duke University has gone on to be pretty prestigious, supporting all these changes that we're going to talk about today and maybe over the next few weeks. JOULES Accelerator is a nonprofit, and we do three things. We sort of identify, advise, and connect companies in our ecosystem. So I'm going to walk you through a little bit about what we do and how it relates to being entrepreneurial and green. And green means so many different things, but it can mean clean tech. It can mean climate tech. It can mean net zero, net negative, sustainability. Everybody's after this space. It's hot again. It's interesting. You even have a special, what do you call them? SPACs, these new organizations looking to help these startups get greater traction sooner in the marketplace. So I can say things are moving fast. This is an interesting space to be in. There's thousands and thousands of startups with new business models and new technologies. It's our job to sort of hunt them down and work with our group of advisors and sponsors to give them market traction. So JOULES is located in Charlotte, but it's primarily working to prepare North Carolina for a carbon-free energy future. It has 2 cohorts a year, which in other words, 2 classes of entrepreneurs that are chosen by our sponsors, as well as the technologies are chosen by our sponsors. So we'll get together and we'll pick, what do we think are the hottest areas? We're not so much focused on the next 5 to 10 years, but we are on the next 1 to 3 years. So for clean tech, that might be, maybe blockchain is 4 years away, energy efficiency is here today. We try to identify technologies that are current and ready to go to market, because we are not an incubator, we're an accelerator. And there's a difference. An accelerator is sort of bring the companies in, work with them fast, and get them market traction. Because the big commodity that is the scarcest commodity for an entrepreneur is time. They need quick decisions. They don't have 6 months or 3 years to debate with Schneider Electric or Duke Energy or Lowe's on whether or not they could do a pilot or become an investor or a joint venture or do a joint venture with them. They need somebody to say, yes, we're interested, we're willing to test this product out, and we'll give it a chance to improve its marketability. So as I mentioned, our program's 90 days. It's 2 classes a year. We've had 52 startups to date that we've worked with. We've locally being Charlotte, we've raised about 20 million. We have 160 advisors and over 100 local jobs. If I looked at that on a national or international basis, those numbers would scale. But my focus again is more regional. There's only 2 of us. We run JOULES as a nonprofit, almost like a lemonade stand. We're trying to survive every day because there's a lot of big players out there in this space. So the way we survive is we're quick, we're fast, we identify the companies, we bring them into our network, we team them with our advisors, and within 90 days, hopefully they have a demonstration project or a pilot. And that pilot, if successful can lead to market traction for the startup. So you can see our ecosystem partners. You know, it's funny, as an environmentalist, everything's ecosystem now instead of network, but we have a lot of cool people that we deal with, whether it's a city, a university, or a corporation. So these folks get together with us twice a year and decide what technologies we want to look at. Do we want to look at artificial intelligence? Do we want to look at robotics? Do we want to look at, you pick the category, electric vehicle charging? We identify those categories with our sponsors who you see here around North Carolina. Most of them are headquartered here. And then with that, we'll bring back a couple hundred companies. We'll vet them. We'll do our due diligence and choose 8 of them to work with twice a year. We just announced our newest class, which was cohort number 7, 3 weeks ago. So this is our class. And the way we get our funding, again, there's only a couple of us. We basically applied for an EDA grant, which is the U.S. Economic Development Administration grant, EDA grant. And what that allowed us to receive was about $1.5 million over 3 years to test technologies in our region, to build a clean tech corridor, and to create jobs and economic development. You can see our startups and where they're, most of them are here we have a couple in Canada, but we have a few in Australia, Germany, Norway, and you can see the types of sectors we're in. So when you say clean tech or green tech or climate tech, it can be a whole host of things. It can be indoor agriculture, it can be water, but for the most part, we are in these categories listed here, like wearables. One of the companies we work with was Proxy in Vancouver, Canada, and I also think they work with Foresight too. And that gentleman, Stephen Wilson, will be speaking next. But we are an accelerator, which means we try to work with companies that are technology ready now. They are companies that you can touch and feel, and not really, they're not theories, they're not ideas. There's something that are pre-sales, pre-Series A, but ready to go to market. So if I look at some of these companies, ones that have had a lot of success, like a company in artificial intelligence, Spark Cognition in Austin, Texas, came in and was able to save Duke Energy $1.5 million to $2 million in a pilot program by helping them work preventive maintenance on some of their energy infrastructure. Another company like Robotics was able to help the city of Charlotte do a better job of cleaning up, spacing, and fixing potholes. So it could be a whole host of activities. Dynamex is working with the city of Charlotte and Raleigh and Durham to help them meet their sustainable energy goals. Every city has these goals, but they're not so sure how they're going to reach them and how they're going to manage the reduction in greenhouse gas to get there. They may say they want to be, net zero by 2035 or 2050, but Dynamex provides a product that shows the city where they are today, and based on some of the decisions they make, like for example, some low-hanging fruit decisions are energy efficiency would be the best example. If you could just make your commercial buildings more energy efficiency, here's the savings, and here's how that translates into reduction of greenhouse gas. Well, Dynamex has a software program that allows the cities to do that. And Duke Energy is interested in that because they support those cities. So these are some of the companies we worked with. A lot of them are from California. I wish we could have more in North Carolina, just like I'm sure you wish you had more in Ontario. But we found that we had to go outside to bring them in here because we have a pretty good network to seed them in our region, but we don't have thousands of green entrepreneurs or clean tech companies that meet our requirements, which are technology readiness, number 8, 9, or 10. So some of the market trends that we're looking at that are very interesting today are there's strong VC, venture capital is back looking at this space, especially given the accelerated digitized workforce. Utilities average age are like 55 years old, and those folks are retiring. How do they keep that intellectual capability with the company so it just doesn't walk off, in a couple of years? That would be that's an example of companies that we're working with today. You're seeing more acceleration. In my space 5 years ago, there weren't a whole lot of players, but now the Electric Power Research Institute, Greentown Labs, the Third Derivative at a Rocky Mountain Institute. All these guys are starting to, all these people are now creating accelerators, and it's becoming a crowded space because for me to be successful, I have to identify companies that I can hopefully turn into a pilot project in 90 days, because that's how I measure my success. And getting quality companies is the challenge, because one thing we don't do is we're not taking equity. We're not taking, we're not providing, we're not an incubator. We're not giving them facilities or wet labs or dry labs. What we're doing is getting access to senior executives at major corporations that will hopefully guide them through that corporate bureaucracy to get something done with them in a short period of time. So we've always got to find quality companies. And a lot of companies and a lot of they're not really competitors, but folks that share our space are providing monies and equity to these companies, which are becoming more and more attractive. So that's another trend. Workforce digitization, I think I talked about. There's new funds from BlackRock. Amazon's got $2 billion. Microsoft's got $1 billion. There's corporate climate action. I think in the US alone, I think there's over 4,000 cities and corporations that support the Paris Climate Treaty. And you're seeing more of that every day. It's not even government driven as much as it's corporate driven. And you see if the House Dems have put a package of $2 trillion of climate investment on the table. And most people will tell you, the scientists will say it's going to take 2 to 3 trillion a year over the next 20 or 30 years to get to that 1.5 degrees Celsius reduction in temperature. So these are some of the cool trends that we see, and we certainly are on top of based on our startups. I will tell you that working with corporations, and I'll bring up some examples like Train Technologies or Bank of America or Duke Energy, they learn just as much and probably more from the startup than the startup gains from the corporation. Because a lot of these corporations aren't nimble. They don't have a sense of urgency. The startups in 90 days could go out of business. The corporations can drag stuff on for a long time. So by bringing and marrying the two of those parties, it really brings a lot of opportunity for the corporations to learn too, especially in a utility environment when the average age, and I came from Duke Energy, I retired from there. As I said, it's an older crowd. You see folks like Amazon putting $2 billion into green tech, but their employees are still unhappy because they think they can do so much more. That's a good tension to have. We seek for our 2 cohorts a year, companies that are pre-Series A, have strong founding teams, can demonstrate their product, and have scalability. The startups don't receive much. It's in terms of they don't have to give up much. They receive great network of advisors. They don't have to give up any equity. They don't have to spend a lot of time. And before it was virtual, they only really came in at the beginning and at the end, and they get a quick yes or no. And that's what a lot of them are looking for. Yes, is the city of Charlotte, North Carolina interested in helping them? Or is Duke Energy, or is SAS, the software development firm out of Raleigh? They get that, and that's what it's all about. So you can see our application process. So for cohort 7, we looked at about 2,000 companies. It's easy to find these companies. The question really is, how do you know which ones can get traction? Well, the way we know is that we work with our sponsors to pick the companies. So it's not me. There's 2 of us, as I mentioned. It's not me. It's me working with the expertise from the universities and from the corporations and consulting firms. Our startup characteristics for our portfolio, they've been around for about 2 years. They've raised less than $1 million. Most of them seem like a lot of them are from California. We have a few in North Carolina, and we do try to improve. One of our goals is to get 1/3 of them to be either women or underrepresented minorities. And 33% is, we've not attained that goal yet, but for the last class, we got to 25%. Here's our class. So on September 30th, we had a virtual meeting just like you're having today. What happened in that meeting, we had Gretchen O'Hara, who's the VP at Microsoft for Sustainability. She recently raised $1 billion fund for Women in Cloud, which is basically a software development entrepreneurial program for women. She was the keynote speaker. Microsoft is a member of our of JOULES, and they're on our board. And they helped, and with their help, as well as Duke Energy's and others, we were able to pick these 8 companies to work with. Harvest Thermal, Hearth Labs, Yada Energy, and you can see where they are. They might be involved in flooding. They might be involved in corporate sustainability. They might be involved in improving HVAC systems. They might be and also transmission lines. So what happens is these 8 companies come in and get assigned advisors, and they come back in January and they share their journeys with our community, with our network. And success, the way we define it, is three ways. It's community engagement. So we're actually educating our region on what a decarbonized economy is. You know, there's a lot going on around the country, and California is a little bit ahead because of regulation. But Duke in North Carolina has pretty low energy prices. So California energy prices might be double what they are in North Carolina. So that makes it more challenging for us to bring companies to our community to get market traction. But working with others, we realize electric vehicles and building efficiencies are incredibly critical, key to the future. And our companies want to bring that here and want to test it out today. And that's what we're about. Another big success factor for us is business development, which is we bring a company in, they do a pilot, they have success, they get some market traction, they get some investment from venture capitalists, from angels, or even some of these special purpose acquisition companies. And then lastly, economic development, which is jobs. Hopefully they can create some jobs in our region. They may be from Austin, they may be from Toronto, but when they come down here, if they have some success, maybe they open up an office, maybe they even potentially could relocate. But our goal really is to bring the companies in, make sure our community understands the technology, and it leads to business development to ultimately reduce greenhouse gas in the Raleigh-Durham, Charlotte, in Raleigh-Durham, Chapel Hill, and the Charlotte regions. And here's a case study I just brought in here, a poor Bagava from Weave Grid. He came in and he worked with Duke Energy. He's currently working on a pilot project to optimize EV charging. And because of working with Duke Energy, he recently raised $2.1 million from a San Francisco-based venture capital firm called the Wesley Group. And that's a really good example where we've kind of created some jobs, a pilot, and some investment for a startup, and we've helped make our region safer. So that's really, that's JOULES in a nutshell. Look forward to listening to some questions and really appreciate the time that you afforded me and JOULES to tell our story, and hope that we can work together because we are a North American ecosystem. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bob. Some really great questions are coming in, so please keep sending them and then I'll get to them at the end. And last up, we have Stephen Wilson. Stephen Wilson is the Vice President of Operations with the Foresight Cleantech Accelerator. He graduated from the Sauder School of Business with a Bachelor of Commerce. Starting his career at an event marketing company, he moved into fashion before finding his passion for electronics. Having worked with startups in the LED lighting space to a global company in power conversion, Stephen has worked in teams both small and large to raise financing, launch products, drive volume, and deliver on complex custom sales. He joins us today from Vancouver, British Columbia.
Stephen, we can't hear you.
As Stephen tries to connect, I can quickly ask Bob a question that someone has sent in, if you're comfortable with that, Bob.
Sure.
Okay, perfect.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there we go. We're good.
Okay. Let me try that one more time. Still good? See my screen? Hear me talking?
Perfect.
Awesome. All right. Well, what you couldn't hear was me just thanking Carly for the introduction and Brock for having me here today and the people at the CEC for organizing this. And so I'll just quickly head on through that part and talk a little bit about the next 15 minutes of your lives. I'm going to talk a little bit about myself because green entrepreneurs, I think we understand them a little bit. And so the things we're trying to deliver to you will give you an idea of some of the challenges you might face. What I think green entrepreneurship is, and I definitely echo a lot of the points made by Brock and Bob. Then I'll just talk about who some of the green entrepreneurs are that we've worked with to give you an idea. And finally, I'm going to tell you some things how you might get started. So diving right in about Foresight, that's the clean tech accelerator that I work for. We've created over 5,000 jobs, worked with over 450 companies, helped them raise over $250 million in capital over the last 7 years. They're generating over $150 million a year in revenue. And we've engaged with 139 challenge partners. So I think this is a key thing that Bob touched on. We have to smooth the way for people. And you want to work with partners who smooth your way into industry. What we saw at the beginning before we started our industry innovation programs was all these great little ideas, these little SMEs and these massive industrial players, and it's hard. It's hard to get in there. They're big companies, they're thousands of employees, they're slow moving, as Bob pointed out, sometimes because that's the way that their systems are set up to work to protect themselves from bad decisions, but as well, it makes it a little bit harder for them to innovate. So with our industry innovation programs, what we try to do is bring those industry partners a little bit closer, speed up that process. We also deem ourselves more of a clean tech ecosystem, and the industry players. We also try to build in networks with investors and government. We need a lot of government support in Canada. We're very blessed to have a lot of funding programs, but also there's some regulatory challenges. You need regulatory certainty around some of these business models. And finally, academia. We want to see academia working on the problems that industry faces, and we want to see academic institutions there to help test and validate some of the innovations. So we're trying to bring together all those 5 disparate groups to have the conversations and speed up the entire clean tech adoption cycle. We have a couple more people than Bob. We've got a full team of, I think that's 12 people working on this, on communications, on program management. We also have a team of over 50 mentors and executives in residence to help support the ventures that come through our programs. And here's a little quote from somebody who went through one of any energy. Since we joined Foresight, we've quadrupled our team within the last year, experienced tremendous growth, and successfully raised capital. And I guess my point here would be, yes, he was a happy customer, but there's lots of people who are looking to help you. So be it Foresight, be it Bob's organization, JOULES, be it Brock, the University of Waterloo, there are accelerators, and Brock has mentioned, or sorry, Bob mentioned that there's more of them coming on, third derivative out of Colorado. Reach out for assistance. There's lots of people who want to see you succeed. So what is green entrepreneurship in my mind? Here's a little thing I took off of the Green Entrepreneur Project, and it defined it as the activity of consciously addressing an environmental, social problem or need through the realization of entrepreneurial ideas with a high level of risk, which has a net positive effect on the natural environment, and at the same time is financially sustainable. And that's a mouthful. I far prefer the quote on the right from Benjamin Franklin: do well by doing good. And here I'd like to focus on the doing well part for a second. We need to dispel that myth that things that are good for the environment are not good for the economy. They can be both. So what I want to see everybody on this call go out and do is build companies that can scale profitably, that can hire lots of people in whatever area you happen to be located, that can pay your suppliers, that can be a positive impact on the society outside of the environmental impacts you have. And also to realize that doing good isn't so much a destination as a state, an approach, right? We have to make things better. So not all green entrepreneurship has to go for, there's a local company here, General Fusion, that's looking at clean fusion and solving the energy crisis. We can just make things incrementally better. We have to look at all those options. Now I'd like to look at some examples of green entrepreneurs that I know. And I'll start off with Gareth Brown at Clear. Clear's claim to fame is they can make wind farms 1% to 2% better. That's not super exciting. But when you think about it, because it's a software play, there's no added cost for that. That's a 2% increase that goes straight to the bottom line. So it's actually very important. And if you think about what that 1% would mean, if he can service 100 wind farms, that's like adding a brand new wind farm to the energy grid without having to build anything, without using any land, no extra emissions. So actually, this is a pretty exciting and powerful idea. And when I look at Gareth, he comes with deep industry experience. He worked for about 10 or 12 years in the wind farm industry before he founded Clear. This was his first entrepreneurial adventure, and he sought out help from Foresight. Since then, he's built a staff of over 30 people. He's raised over $10 million, and they're well on their way to building a successful, profitable company. And while he does have a background as a mechanical engineer, and his path has been far from certain along the way, it definitely helped him that he started inside the industry. The next person I want to look at, Grace Kwan, didn't start within the industry. Grace Kwan is the founder and CEO of Hydrogen in Motion. And as she tells the story, she was actually taking a hike in Southeast Asia when she realized that now was the time she was going to get involved and be part of the solution. She'd actually promised herself in the late 90s that she would never buy a car until there was a zero emission vehicle. So she spent a little over a decade taking the bus and walking places before she finally came to that conclusion that she had to get involved and do something, that things weren't happening fast enough for her. And her background, she was a CPA and she was working for the Treasury Board of Canada. She had never worked in a technology startup. She'd worked in federal and provincial governments in large organizations. But she looked at the hydrogen space. She determined that actually it was the transportation of hydrogen that was really driving up the cost along the value chain, sought out a PhD working on a novel nanomaterial to help solve that, and founded that company. Next, I'd like to look at Roger Ma from Zoramat. So Zoramat is looking to reduce the cost of carbon capture. Roger spent years in school. Then he spent some more years in school. Then he got his PhD. Then he did some post-grad work. And working with his professor, George Shimizu, he finally got to do something interesting and came up with Zoralite, which is the patented product that Zoramat is commercializing. And it separates carbon dioxide a little bit better in certain circumstances than any other product on the planet. Or at least so Roger would tell you. Now, I think this is the route that lots of people would imagine. You go to school for tons of years, you're deeply scientific, you've worked on a really hard problem, and you got lucky and you found a solution. But that's really only where the work started for Roger. So he's obviously a smart guy. He has this PhD in chemistry, but now, luckily, he's maintained that curiosity and applying it to being an entrepreneur, to the fundraising, to finding a business model, to understanding his customers' real problems. Next, let's look at Mark Rabin from Portable Electric. Who wakes up one day and says, I need to kill all the diesel generators? What kind of educational background leads you to that kind of conclusion, that that's the most important thing you can do for the planet? Well, apparently it's a degree in earth sciences. And Mark actually worked for 12 years as a geologist for the oil and gas industry before deciding that actually electricity was the future and he needed to get involved in it now. Portable Electric is not his first startup. What they're doing is they're taking lithium-ion batteries to replace diesel generators to give portable power. But his first startup was also related to batteries. It was actually around zinc air batteries, and he was looking at stationary applications. After a little over a year, he had to pivot. became part of a new founding team, and portable electric was born out of the realization that stationary power wasn't yet in demand in this area. But it's not all easy. You don't just realize that this is the right market, this is the right product, everything is going to be good. You have to have a little bit of perseverance, and this is why I'm particularly impressed with Mark. At the beginning of the year, his biggest customer was the film industry. And it's not always even the green impact you're giving or the cost savings that are the reasons that people choose your products. They pick it because it's quieter, and the film industry often works in residential neighborhoods, so they got less complaints. But an industry based on bringing together 100 to 150 people in small locations was definitely something that was going to be impacted by COVID-19. And so the business had built and the 27 employees he had manufacturing and renting these units disappeared overnight. But being an entrepreneur, having that spirit and that perseverance, he quickly shifted to frontline workers and the various other portable applications that popped up overnight, managed to keep his business going, and as the film industry restarts, is once again on a path to profitability. Taylor McCartan from Binbreeze. Taylor graduated with a degree in poli-science, political science, before seeking his MBA. And it was while doing his MBA and working on a project that he realized that composting was a challenge. Not everyone was adopting composting, despite it being good for the environment. So what was the problem? And it turns out that some people don't like doing it because the compost bins are smelly and icky. I think that's the technical term he uses. And so he went around to some of the professors at the university he was going to and found some solutions and formed a little team. And out of that project at university, he's now sold at major retailers across Canada. And this is a first-time entrepreneurial venture. Between doing that political science degree and his MBA, he spent 6 years in sales and business development. So no real scientific background here, just a school project that turned into something great. Last up, I'll talk about Trevor Burgess from VoltSafe. Trevor's a serial entrepreneur. His first venture was an ophthalmic lab. They ground the glasses for optometrists. He comes from a family of optometrists, so this wasn't a big stretch from his biology degree. He sold that venture to what would later become FYI Doctors. If you're in Canada, they're a quite large chain of glasses stores. He went on to found a second venture. That one was actually in the automotive industry, and it was automotive mechanics that would come and visit your house and do all your services there. He sold that successfully, and he moved on. And he realized that there was an opportunity in making block heaters more efficient. Actually, that plugs in general have not had any innovation in the last 100 years. And if you could put some smarts in them, you could make them run better. So he can actually tell you how much energy is wasted by a block heater in any car in a northern climate, what that impact is on CO2, and what that dollar impact is for the user. So he's built a business case around adding smarts to block heaters, but he would like to add that smarts to all plugs, making them safer and more energy efficient, turning them off when they're not really needed. So I guess this would lead me to you. What makes a green entrepreneur? Why do you think you can be a green entrepreneur? And I would tell you, if you have any of the characteristics of the people above, you can be a green entrepreneur. If you studied it intensely like Roger, you can be a green entrepreneur. If you didn't, like Taylor, and got a political science degree, you can be a green entrepreneur. If you're a man, if you're a woman, if you're a first-time entrepreneur, if you're a serial entrepreneur, you can be a green entrepreneur. There is no common thread except that these people saw a problem and wanted to address it. And they've all done quite well to date, raising financing, selling products, changing the world. I hope you're inspired, and I'll talk a little bit about how to get started, or at least how I think you should get started. Start today. Start as soon as you can. Don't wait. Talk to customers. The one thing that I often see is people fall in love with their solution instead of the customer's real problem. That's what you will be able to sell, is what the problem is they want to solve. So if you want to build a scalable business, if you want to have an impact globally, you have to focus on the problem of the customer. So start talking to them as soon as possible. You probably won't get it right from inside your own lab or inside your own office. And the third point, and I brought this up earlier, ask for help. There's lots of organizations who want to help you. There's Foresight and all the other people on this call, and there's lots of local organizations, and there's other people. Even the people you talk to who say, no, I'm not interested in your solution, might be willing to help you and point you to someone who is. Ask for help from as many people as you can. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Stephen. Really appreciate your time. So we are going to jump into the Q&A session. We have about 20 minutes of question and answer period. I'll start with Brock, a question directly for you, and then move on to Bob and Stephen. First question, what are the opportunities in green entrepreneurship for developing countries, remote communities, and disadvantaged communities?
Yeah, and we're covering a lot of territory and thinking about that many different kinds of places. But I'm actually a really big fan of the idea that entrepreneurs refer to as leapfrogging. This is the notion that we're often trapped by systems and technologies and approaches that don't serve equally all communities, by outmoded technologies or ideas that just don't benefit all of our communities. We can think, for example, of traditional telephone systems, which required poles and wires and all kinds of hard infrastructure to deliver those services. And so in many places, particularly in the developing world, in places I think of Bangladesh historically or sub-Saharan Africa, the telephone infrastructure was not built out in a way that allowed most people to access it. We can flash forward to a new technology like the smartphones that we use today, and we can leapfrog ahead of that failure to build out the capacity for that traditional industry. We can move to something entirely new to fill a gap in those spaces. And suddenly we can look in a place like Bangladesh, which didn't have that traditional telephone infrastructure. We can see companies like Grameenphone providing cellular service to people all across the country, even in the poorest and most remote of communities. That same concept, I think, really applies to the green entrepreneurship space. We recognize that many of the technologies, many of the business models, many of the companies and industries that we have in place do not meet the needs of our current period, of our current challenges. We can leapfrog past those and we can move ahead to the kinds of things that we do need. We can decarbonize the economy that way. We can protect the environment that way. We can reduce pollution that way. And because we're jumping ahead of a lot of that existing infrastructure to do that, that means that those places that haven't had the same access to the tools or the infrastructure of the past can make that move as well. There are obviously challenges in doing that, but the sense is that we can begin to move past some of the obstacles that have prevented us from doing that in the past. You referenced First Nations communities in particular, the role of some of these technologies in Indigenous communities. This is another one of those examples where we have ignored and disempowered, disenfranchised many of those communities historically. And by developing new green tools, we can provide opportunities to many of those communities to look at opportunities that weren't there previously. Things like new green sources of off-grid energy to replace the kind of destructive and harmful sources of energy that many of those communities turned to in the past. And so I think that that idea of leapfrogging, of moving ahead, is something that will allow us to really take some significant steps forward.
Great, thank you. So everybody write it down, leapfrogging. Okay, so Bob, is the emphasis on quick turnaround in the startup culture, because you spoke about 90 days, I believe that's what this is referring to, does it cause problem on the sustainability of startups, especially in the case of green enterprises?
Well, again, there's a difference between an incubator and accelerator. An incubator might take 3 to 5 years to bring to market. We're going out looking for companies, and they're usually young people. They don't have to be. But these companies, we have a scoring system called technology readiness. And a technology readiness score goes from 1 to 10. 1 would be an idea, 10 would be ready to go to market. So our focus is trying to find those companies that are in the 8, 9, 10 range. So they're ready to go to market. In fact, they may have been successful entrepreneurs and they've already turned and going on to their next venture. So so for us, what becomes important is the screening. So we are screening and talking to companies that we feel are ready to sort of break through. They're not ready for venture capital. So they're between R&D and commercialization, but they have a viable product. And so it's up to us to screen and identify those companies to make sure that when we bring them in, that our ecosystem, A, is interested in them, and 2, would do a pilot with them. So that's why, and we had to do that because there's only 2 of us and we don't have a whole lot of funding and we have to show success. So at the end of the year, if I can't show 5 or 6 success stories, I probably won't be around, because that's our program and that's what's unique about it. It's fast turn, but with companies that are already there. These are not companies that have been around for 90 days. They could have been around for 2 or 3 years or even longer, but typically it's 2 to 3 years.
Great, thank you. Yes, so Velocity, the incubator through the University of Waterloo, you can see some companies in there for up to 3 years. So that makes total sense. Okay, and then Stephen, what are some of the key characteristics that make green entrepreneurs successful?
Thanks, Carly. I think there's lots of characteristics. I would highlight being open-minded. And so I'll give the example of a conversation I was having with John Rohn. He's the CEO of ACCELERATOR Technologies. He was on a panel a few days ago for us. This is his 2nd venture. So he'd already commercialized and exited Nextera, which does biogas. And now he's looking at electro-oxidation of water for industrial uses, wastewater treatment. And he said every day he tries to have a customer call. A day without a customer call is not a good day to him. And he says he's routinely humbled by the things he does not know. So after 6 years looking at wastewater treatment for industrial processes, he admits he does not know everything and understands that he needs to constantly be learning. And so when I gave that example of Roger, who knew a lot about chemistry, he's a very smart guy, but admits that he does not know enough about business. And so if you admit that you do not know enough about your customers, if there is still lots for you to learn, I think that is the thing that I see helpful. The other thing is, and I talked about it a couple of times, is asking for help. Right? I see some of our ventures, they go through the Foresight program. Then they go on to Creative Destruction Labs, which is another accelerator here in Canada. And maybe they'll work with third accelerator to get access to a different network, to get more people as their champions and supporting them, and different views on how they can and should be successful. And I see people going down to accelerators in Houston as well to get access to those networks. So asking for help, so learning and being honest that you don't know everything, and seeking that information and seeking the assistance of others. I think those are the things that early on make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely. We see some companies who have launched from the incubator, but they'll reach back out because we have like community Slack channels, and they'll be like, help, I need an advisor, but they're already like a year out. But it's the asking for help and admitting that you do need help. So that's fantastic. Okay, so this is a question for all of you. Brock, if you'd like to start, what are the opportunities for the real estate sector in relation to green entrepreneurship?
That's a really interesting question. And we're at such a time of upheaval in the real estate space right now as we sort of think about how pandemic and COVID have shaped the way that we use physical space. Do we work in offices or like I'm sitting in my basement right now, right? This room doubles as the Fortnite room and the video game room, right? So how we use our spaces and how we build real estate to accommodate what we're doing is changing pretty dramatically. I would say a couple of things. First off, that if we want to support green entrepreneurship and green activity, we need to conceive of our real estate in green ways as well. And that isn't just things like, oh, let's go get some LEED certification and design green buildings. It's how do we actually make our real estate contribute in a creative way to the impact that we have as businesses, as individuals, as entrepreneurs. At the University of Waterloo, we recently built a building called Evolve One, which we like to describe as the greenest building in Canada. It's an office building, but it is a net positive office building. It generates more energy than it consumes. It contributes energy back into the grid by virtue of a whole series of kind of solar panels and other forms of energy generation technologies. And those are the kinds of things I think we need to think about. If we want to transform that sector, we can't just sort of imagine that someday we'll be able to do all these really interesting things. We have to start to build it now. We have to experiment with these technologies today. And we have to demonstrate that greener buildings, greener approaches to real estate and real estate development will have real and tangible impacts, both from an environmental perspective and on the bottom line of the companies that are going to occupy those buildings moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I could add, we have a few companies in real estate that have done well. State of Place teaches cities and communities how to be more walkable. They have an algorithm, and they study Charlotte, and they did Raleigh, and they did Durham. And they work with 3 developers to get their community to improve their chances to get a zoning rehearing, or to get the zoning they needed to build a community. And it's about walkability. It's about location and sidewalks and traffic and retail. It bundles it all together. You can go onto my website if you wanted to look at JOULES and look at State of Place. That was a cool one. There's a lot of building efficiency. You know, companies that we have 2 sponsors that are looking at building efficiency and heat transfer in buildings and HVAC and cleaning of ventilation systems. So there's a lot of interesting topics going on, but yeah, there is a concern that there's not going to be any more large commercial buildings built in cities right now, but residential has taken off. And you're seeing these big home builders. We got a company called EnCoat that coats homes, improves the energy efficiency by 20 to 25% in Arizona and in Boston. So there's a lot of little things that are going on. And some of these builders, and you can go, I think it's Lennar Homes was one, but they have identified how to separate themselves from the average player. They're building like Duke Energy, building communities with contractors that have, the EV setup already in the house and have community solar. So there's a lot of interesting things going on in the real estate space.
Does that make it my turn? All right, I'll jump in. Huge opportunities in built environment, from retrofits to new builds. There's the technology challenges that can be addressed, and there's also the market challenges that can be addressed. I saw a great graph a little while ago, and it's old. It's from like 2008, and it actually charts the cost of CO2 by tons abated and activity. And so you get these direct air capture guys at $100 a ton, $200 a ton, $300 a ton, and you get something down negative. It pays you money to change your light bulbs to LED. It pays you money to change out your furnace to a heat pump, right? There's all these things. It pays you money to insulate your walls, but people aren't doing those things. So there's a ton of adoption and business model and market opportunities in that space. How can we get people to use the best of current technology, which is at a ridiculously low penetration rate? I think, Carly, you mentioned I was in an LED company. That was 15 years ago, and people are still out buying incandescent lamps. So there's that whole challenge. And then, of course, there's all the technology. We've got people who are building hempcrete blocks and hempcrete walls so that it's biomass and fully circular and all these wonderful things. And got people working on how to get rid of concrete and all the CO2 comes out of that. So there's certainly the technology challenges that exist in that built environment, but there is a ton of challenges that is in the market and the business model innovation and how you can get people to adopt these technologies. One of our companies, Ocos out of Montreal, is doing smart homes, and they realize people aren't going to pay $1,000, $2,000 to put in all the sensors and manage it. And it's too complicated for some people. So they're saying, pay $20 a month. We'll manage it all. We'll make sure it works. And we'll save you more than $20 on your utility bills. This will pay for itself, and we guarantee it. So that business model innovation, how can you get people to start using that thermostat that turns down their house at night when they go to sleep, when they won't even notice it, when they leave for work, right? So some of the technology is already there, and it's a business model problem. Some of the technology still needs to be developed. But if you ask me what are the opportunities in the built environment, this 90 minutes is not going to be enough. We're going to go on for hours here.
There should be a session strictly on this question. So thank you to the person who asked the question. Okay, so this is just to everyone as well. Does anybody know the proportion of women and visible minorities in the green entrepreneurship sphere?
I don't have any good data overall. I will say that at the University of Waterloo, as we meet with those who are interested in becoming green entrepreneurs, about 60% of the people who engage with our entrepreneurship and environment office are women. And so we definitely see a difference in the gender composition of that group of entrepreneurs, at least in our own sort of direct experience. Beyond that, I haven't seen any sort of formal data, but I do think that green entrepreneurship is one of these areas that is more open to those who may have been marginalized by the traditional approach to the economy, who may have been left out because they were sort of dismissed, because of the sort of the old boys club that dominated a traditional industry, or because they didn't want to play by the rules of that existing industry. And so therefore this new space, this green space, is often open to those who are coming with fresh perspectives and different backgrounds and new sets of ideas that are going to be valuable for changing existing industries.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing as Brock. I have not seen any hard statistics on that. I do know that Foresight recently ran a Women in Clean Tech for all the people and celebrating the people in Canada that we are aware of, that are founders or at the executive level in their companies. And it is an impressive list, and some of the great companies, Open Ocean Robotics and now Summit Nanotech, and a number of companies are led by women entrepreneurs and minorities. And I know Startup Edmonton recently had one for minority founders. They had a special week focusing on that. So I think it is more inclusive, to Brock's point. I don't know the exact percentage, but it's great ideas and perseverance, and anybody can take part.
All right, great. And now that we are almost at our 4:30 mark, that will be the end of the questions. I apologize to all the participants who sent in questions. I am sure our panelists would be happy maybe to receive emails or for us to speak further, or you have 5 more sessions to go to throughout this term. So as a huge thank you to Bob, Stephen, and Brock, we appreciate your time today and all of your knowledge on the sector. And then thank you to Jean, Richard, and Jonathan as well for coming and speaking at the beginning. And then a massive thank you to the 161 participants that are in this call right now. We appreciate everyone's time and being here and wanting to learn more. It just shows that our future is bright. So I'm going to hand it back over to Brock to end off the session.
Yes, and I promise not to take too much time here. As Carly has said, we're very appreciative of everybody who's taken part in this session, and we hope that you'll continue to look at the sessions that are still to come up. Before we talk about those, I do want to say thank you to Carly for acting as the MC today. It's been great to have your involvement and to sort of keep us all on track here. And those of you who are participating haven't seen all the discussions behind the scenes, but she's done a great job at keeping us organized. I also want to say thank you to the CEC team, who have been sort of the backbone of this particular workshop delivery. Cesar and your team on the technical side, to Patty, Rosa, Edna, Ariel, and others who have been helping with translation. We really appreciate the work that's been there. And Richard, sticking with us through the whole session, spending the time to do the introductory comments and really showing your support for this effort is very, very much appreciated. As I've mentioned, this is the first of 6 workshops on a range of green entrepreneurship topics that we're going to be working through over the course of the next 6 weeks. Next week, at the same time, we'll be looking at how to start a green business. And we have another sort of panel of really, really amazing people to walk us through the steps in starting the green business. There was a question there towards the end about the gender structure. We recognize we had a series of male presenters this time around. It's going to be a series of female presenters next time around to help sort of underline how strong a force women are within this sector. But we think you'll be really engaged by the ideas that they're bringing from, again, a range of locations across the North American community, including Adrienne Knights, a business information officer with the City of St. Catharines, Tanya Delmato, the director of Greenhouse, a social enterprise incubator, and Dr. Claudia Sanchez, a professor at Anahuac University in Mexico. We look forward to seeing you at that next session. The registration link that you used for today is the same registration link that you can use next week. So please come and join us again. Encourage others that you know to take part. And we look forward to kind of building our knowledge over the course of the 6 sessions on the question of green entrepreneurship. Thanks again for your support today, and we hope to see you in a week's time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.